Well, sleep ain't nothing but time away. But I'm already living in a dream state. I thank the stars for my new best friend. Lord bless her heart, I'm in love again. Oh, oh. Now food tastes good and now water tastes sweet. And I feel feelings that had long left me.
All right, welcome to Make Your Own Fun. I am here with singer and songwriter Isaac Friend from Richmond, Virginia. And if you're just tuning in, we just came out of the video for the song Arrival. So, Isaac, I got a question right off the bat for that one, if you're ready.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so what was the inspiration behind the song Arrival? And I gotta ask, because then people are gonna want to know, how the hell did you guys get that upright piano down by the river for the video?
So so starting with the piano. So the piano, I got hit up by Radio WV, the YouTube channel out of West Virginia, and I had played this like little snippet actually on my piano in my house right there,
Wow.
and so I just recorded this little snippet of it. I was really just checking to see like how the phone audio would sound with singing in the computer and or the phone and the piano, and then I just like posted. I was like, I haven't posted anything in forever, and I was in a recording studio with a friend of mine in Bristow, Virginia, recording a different track called "All Black Everything," and my friend had emailed them, and my friend had been in the music world for a long time. He was an artist and kind of stopped doing that, and so he reached out and was like, "Hey, you should check out my friend." And didn't expect to hear a response. And like same day, while like I was tracking vocals, he was just like, "Oh yeah, they responded with this." And then I got in contact with them, and they're like, "We really like that short video about that song from that song Arrival that you done on your piano." I was like, I just like I don't really think much of that video. I was just really just kind of like testing to see how it would sound because I had not had the piano for very long. So he called me, the guy who runs it, and he was like, "We'd really like to do the piano thing in the woods." I was like, "All right, so you want to get a piano into the woods? That would be
Sounds
sick. I would
easy.
love that. Yeah, that would be so tight." So they drove here from West Virginia, and they had been scouting locations to film. We did about 4 or 5 songs. And for that, Arrival was the first one that we did, and that was on piano. So they found this piano, I think, on Facebook Marketplace, and then I drove out there with them, and it was two guys. One was Draven Wright from Radio West Virginia, and David from the Truthful Sessions. And so they were working together that day. And so they drove out to this house, and this guy was just giving away a piano. Like he was sending me links to different pianos that I would think would be a good fit. And so they drove out there with a rented U-Haul. We got it in the U-Haul. It was very heavy. And then out to the woods. And I was in the back. I was in the back of the U-Haul with it strapped in there and just kind of like holding it down so it wouldn't move in the back. And then we get to the woods and we unhaul it from the back. And I don't know where we are because I there's no windows in the back of this U-Haul. So I'm literally just holding on to this piano like I'm, being taken out there by the cartel. And then we get off and then we lug it through. It must have been like not that long, but it must have been if 200 feet out into this wooded area by the water. And then I had my friend Charlie come out there. Charlie's a brilliant piano player, guitarist for J. Roddy Walston and Pom Pom, and he does all kinds of brilliant stuff. His band, The Trillions, short plug. And so he came out there and he tunes my piano here. He's like the resident tuner of Richmond. He tunes like everybody's pianos. So he came out there. It was like 100 degrees, and obviously, like any wired or like stringed instrument, is very sensitive to humidity and temperature. So we had a very short window. So he came out there and tuned the piano, and it must have fallen out of tune like 3 hours after we were there because it was so humid and hot. But we got the clip, and yeah, I think the piano's still there to this day. Don't tell the environmentalists. We didn't intend for it to be that way. We
That's
intended to get it.
amazing.
We
That's
actually
amazing.
most
I like that story better than I was like, man, I hope it's not like a bunch of guys sitting around like at a bar somewhere and they're saying like, you know, it'd be really cool. We got this freaking piano out there and we just like took it out there. But first, we need another case of beer.
yeah, dude,
I
yeah.
was hoping it wasn't one of those things where it's like, I wonder if we could do this.
Yeah, it's so
Okay, so
funny.
let me ask you this. So when you get a song idea, do you know right away whether it'll work on better on guitar or piano? Is that like trial and error, or like the melody just pops in your head and you're like, oh, I can just hear myself strumming chords or something?
That's a good question. I think it really depends on how important the rhythm is, or like the percussive element of the song, and how much that contributes to the vocal or lyrical delivery. Like there's songs, that have a very distinctive, like where the rhythm of the guitar is really driving and informing the melody, the cadence, and all that. And then some songs where, like songs that I've got can be transposed to piano and vice versa. But I don't think all of them could be that that way, as far as like solo instruments, it's like playing like one person playing everything. But I think they can all, like if I'm playing on guitar, I think they can all be accompanied by piano really well. Um, yeah, I think it all depends. Like there's different textures. Like I've got, for every song I write, I've got about two or three different variations of it. Um, like different, verses or different melodies, or even just a different way of carrying a certain cadence in a certain part. Nothing like super drastic to where it's like a totally different song, but I get attached to certain versions, and then I have to choose one that I want to become, people to become most familiar with,
Mhm.
and then try not to switch it up too much, because I hate it when you see a band and then you see them live and you love their record and they play it like totally different. And sometimes I'm like, that's super cool. And sometimes I'm like, dude, I want to hear it the way
Well,
it was.
sometimes you can understand it. Like I remember when I years ago when I went to go see Radiohead, I was like, oh well, I don't care if they play Creep. And then when they played it, it was like in a different key and maybe it was like a waltz or something. And I was like, I get that because they are so freaking tired of playing that song, a 30-year-old song, and they're just like, ugh. But they know people want to hear it, even if it's just for an encore. But on the other
Yeah.
hand, there's somebody like Bob Dylan, which he'll just make anything the
Yeah.
music, whatever you want to call it. And then it's like you're like, what? And then you get to the chorus, you're like, oh, Tangled Up in Blue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's what this is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or like, I don't know if you heard the famous story. This was a couple years ago where people were like, oh, well, he doesn't talk to the crowd much anymore, and he'll just sit at the piano and barely just talk or maybe introduce the band. And I guess he just had like a shit day or whatever, and he was playing a song, and it was one of like the newer songs from one of his newer albums, and some drunk asshole, like you will at any concert, right, gets up and he was just like, "Blah, blah, blah, yeah, play Freebird," and that's like the oldest cliche joke in the world, right? And I guess
Yeah.
he walked,
Yeah.
I guess he was like, went over to his guitar player, goes, "Give me that guitar," and took the electric guitar, and they played Freebird. And the guy and somebody had like a cell phone and they would film the guy and the jackass that was yelling stuff, and he was just like.
Yeah.
And then
Dude, that, yeah.
Dylan just goes back, hands the guitar, back to whoever, and then just goes back to playing like, one of those rockabilly songs that he's got on his newer albums. And everybody was just like,
Yeah.
what did we just see?
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, I've actually heard of a few bands who have done that here and there, and come and prepared for that. And I can't remember who was. Yeah, anyway, I can't remember, but somebody else had done that and just like ripped it. And yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
it's really
the
funny.
people deal with hecklers and comedy, music, whatever. And it's just, if you're going to get trashed and make an ass of yourself, you just got to be prepared because these people have seen it all, they have done it all, and they are not going to be sidelined by, your jackassery. They're
Yeah.
gonna, and if
Yeah,
you get pulled
it's
in and you're
true.
part of the show, that's your fault.
Yeah. Yeah, that is very, very true. Man. Wait, what was your I feel like I was
Well, I mean,
hanging on one of your
I was
questions.
gonna say, like, when we're talking about piano or guitar, like, I almost feel like most musicians are like, when the idea pops in their head, it's just gonna most of the time it's gonna be like, what's the closest thing to me that I can grab, right? Like you might
Yeah,
not
and
be at your own house, you might be at somebody else's house, and they just might have like a guitar that has four strings on it, or a banjo, or your kitchen spoons, and you're just trying to get a rhythm down and put your phone down and be like, oh, I don't want to forget this idea, right?
yeah, I think
Whatever you can get to.
it's true. And I remember back in the day, we would have like field recorders that you had to buy, like little Zoom field recorders. I used to work at a music store, and yeah, they were like $150. And basically they do what like the voice memo app does on our phones now, but with this like stereo recording feature that was never that great, and the auto gain feature, it would just clip all the time. But like that's how I would record ideas. I actually found one recently of a bunch of old ideas from like when I was in my early 20s. And I'm 37 now, so it's been a minute. But having voice memo is contributes to the capturing of more ideas than anything else, really. And I'm fortunate enough to be, I have a house where I've got a ton of guitars, I've got a piano, and drums was my first instrument, so that informs a lot of my songwriting. Just knowing how, if I write a song, it's got to be strong enough to stand on its own as a single instrument and a single voice. That's usually my litmus test for like what's worth pursuing in a more produced way.
Mhm.
I think a lot of songwriters are like that. Like I'm not like a guitar virtuoso or a piano virtuoso by any means
You're
at
not gonna
all.
like hang up from the ceiling on bungee cords and play like a Stratocaster or something crazy.
Nah, not today. Probably not today. I think that's more of a money
Like that Eddie
pursuit.
Van Halen stuff from the 80s where you're just like, how could you even keep the blood flow, man?
Yeah, those guys were like Olympians who played guitars. Nuts.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah. The showmanship back then was insane. But yeah, I don't know. Like, it's a lot of it is very mood dependent. Um, like a certain melody will pop into my head separate from a chord structure, or more commonly, I'll just have a series of chords that I really enjoy. And I think I really benefit from, I used to be kind of self-conscious about the limitations that I have in my knowledge of theory, or um, I guess some of the more evolved, I don't know, I feel like I'm underselling myself, but I have a lot of friends who are just brilliant musicians, like fantastically classically trained, or just virtuoso in so many different things. And I've always just had to work with what I've got, and I've got some songs that are two chords, I've got some songs that are much more complex, as long as they can kind of convey the point that I'm trying to make. And
Exactly, exactly. Like I didn't want to
yeah,
cut you off, but I was just gonna
no,
say, um, like you got to appreciate a little bit of everything with music, like you have jazz and classical. But the songs we keep coming back to, if we go all the way back to like great American folk music that's like hundreds of years old or whatever, it's all three and four chords, you know. Nobody's really reinventing the wheel. Like I was talking to a musician on here a couple months ago, and I was saying like there are so many songs and there's just so many chord progressions you can use. Like the one
yeah,
of the most common used chord progressions is C, G, A minor, F.
yeah,
And it's like,
of
oh,
course,
well, you're ripping this off. And no, you're not ripping anybody off. There's just only so many chord combinations that you can do. So
yeah,
that chord combination is Let It Be,
yeah,
right? It's No Woman, No Cry by Bob Marley, right?
oh
And
yeah,
then I think it's So Lonely by the Police.
yeah,
Sting just said, well, we're a punk band, so we just sped up No Woman, No Cry and just played it all the same way through, just real angry, you know?
yeah. It's
So, I mean,
yeah,
there's only so many, you know what I mean? It's like, don't feel like you have to be Neil Peart playing the drums, or you have to be Eddie Van Halen on the guitar, or you have to be some crazy progressive rock, this or that, or, piano concerto playing whiz. It's just like people connect to your stuff. Like when I first heard your stuff on Instagram, I was just scrolling through, like, oh, I wonder, like, hear some new music and stuff. And it just kind of popped up. And I was like, oh my God, this dude's voice is like haunting. It cuts right through. The lyrics I totally related to. I mean, it kind of had, please don't take offense to this, it had like a Libertine or Lumineers vibe, but
okay, yeah,
the echo on the voice and everything. And I was like, that's all you need, man. I mean, I know you think that maybe there's not enough, I don't know, pizzazz or whatever, but you don't need that. Leave that to like the teeny bopper girls that have like the auto-tune voices where somebody in the background's just pushing a button and the track starts. And then they're
Yeah.
singing at a mall somewhere, right?
Yeah, there's an audience for everything.
Oh yeah.
When I was younger, I guess. So my dad, I learned my first chords on guitar from my dad, and he had always had this philosophy of just like, I don't know if it was Dylan who said it, but it was all you need is three chords and the truth. And I kind of, being surrounded by musicians in Richmond, and there's so many brilliant musicians here. And I think, I felt at some point in my early 20s, maybe, I don't know. I think I was very set on how I felt comfortable in my lyricism and in my knowledge and taste for structure. But it was really, I don't really have a point I'm driving here, but like the people that I surrounded myself with, and I had a band, Ryan Tinsley, Joe Vanderhoff, they really made those songs come to life, and it really inspired and really informed how I wrote songs, and knowing that the simplicity is sometimes okay. And I had, I've written more complex stuff, and I've written really simple stuff. So I'm just like thinking out loud here.
Yeah, you're
I feel
doing
like I'm
it.
getting a
It's
little
okay. You're doing
circular,
fine. Yeah.
but yeah, yeah, it varies. But
No,
going back
I
to like,
completely agree. And I completely agree. And I think that when you're really young and you're starting out, it's kind of like you're trying to, I think a lot of people when they're really young and and they've just had their first couple lessons and they're first getting into open mics and this and that, they're trying to compare themselves to what they have on a recording or their idols or what they're listening to. And that's like professionally produced stuff. And most of that's been around for years. Whereas
yeah,
like, we don't know that when we're younger, right? When we're younger, it's like when we're older, we wish we could go back in time and talk to our younger self and say, like, hey, if you have to compare yourself to anybody, compare yourself to like the people in your like local area and your local scene. Because you know what? Some of those people have been playing piano or the bassoon or whatever since they were 4 or 5 years old. But by and large, it's kind of an even playing field, right? Because you're going to local shows, you're seeing somebody. And the thing that you learn, I think, when you first start going to open mics is like what to do and what not to do.
yeah, you just learn. Yeah, you just learn over time, and yeah, yeah, that's all there is. And yeah, having been doing it since I was like, I started playing clarinet in school band when I was in fifth grade, and then we had this drummer who played. I went to middle school in Richmond City, and we had this drummer who was playing the drum kit for the whole band, and I was just like, man, this dude is so good. And at the time, I was listening to all the grunge and all the classic rock and all the stuff, like the hip hop and the pop that was out at that time. And so I was like, I want to do that. And then,
Were you telling that to like a music teacher? Like, I just want to do that. And
yeah, so I would learn
they're
all the
like,
parts for
reel it back,
clarinet.
reel it back.
Right. Yeah. I always want to do like a million things at a time. And sometimes it like stunts me into doing nothing. And then sometimes I'm able to like get a regimen of being able to check stuff off at a time. But,
Well,
and
let me
also
get,
like,
go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say, like, I hear that all the time. It's like people are like, don't get offended, but like you've got kind of like a this vibe, or like you remind me of this, and then they name somebody awesome. I'm like, why would I be offended by that? That's so
Because you know what
that's
that
so cool.
is? That stems from, and I'm a writer and this and that, and I make movies and stuff too.
Oh,
But
nice, dude. I
I
didn't know that.
think I think where that comes from is when we're younger, I'm gonna keep going back to that, where everybody's trying so hard to find their own identity as an artist, where it's like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. So if somebody says like, oh yeah, let's just, throw a name out there, like the bridge of that song that you played, I saw you at that bar on Thursday, and that like third or fourth song you played, the bridge really sounded like this Paul Simon thing I heard. And like, it doesn't seem like somebody would lose their freaking mind, but somebody might be like, "Ugh, Paul Simon, what the F, man, piss off.
Yeah, yeah,
Then you get older and you're like, really?
yeah,
The Paul Simon song, man, was it like a Simon and Garfunkel? Like, but when you're younger, you're just like, like people have that
yeah.
mentality when they're like 16, 17, 18, where they're like, I'm reinventing the wheel, man. What are you
That's
talking?
so true. That's so true. And yeah, I think that's the point I was trying to make earlier about like when I was younger, I was like self-conscious by the idea that I was somehow gonna like reinvent, 12 notes in a scale and like chord
I'm gonna
structures
come
to
up with
be.
a new chord.
Yeah, like it
You're gonna be
doesn't,
like,
it's not a thing. Like, yeah, and yeah, over time, just being, realizing that like I can't reinvent like I've had this consistent theme of like, oh, I can do this, like I'm able to do this thing, so it can't be that good. And I think I've talked to a lot
it
of other
can't be
artists and
easy. Like
songwriters.
once I figured out rhythm and timing and key and all these other things that seem annoying now. All right, well, let me ask you this, and then I'm going to circle back to this because I
Yeah,
want
for
to
sure.
get some other stuff in there.
Yeah.
So, was writing the song "Slow Moments,"
Hmm.
the writing of it as stream of conscious as the lyrics sound, because it kind of sounds like you're like, and I did this, and I went here, and then I did this, and then I did that. So, when you were thinking of the song as it was coming together, were you actually either recalling something or were you actually walking around your apartment like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that? And then it's like, because it has that kind of like going through a day kind of feeling to it, you know?
It's sometimes it's hard for me to recall what exactly. So I feel like the older I get, the more I feel like my brain's like an antenna,
Uh-huh.
and I attribute some of it to having like ADHD, which I've had my entire life, which is,
Mhm.
it is what it is. A lot of us are like that, but I'll get these signals and I feel like I'm receiving something that's trying to be given to me, and I have to do it in that exact moment, because when I was growing up, I'd be like, oh, I like that idea. I'll remember that and I'll write that down later. And I never did. And I think like there were probably hundreds of ideas that were lost. Some of them circle back around over a decade, 2 decades later, and will present themselves again. And it's very interesting. Not to get on like a whole philosophical rant about like how, receiving messages and being ready to receive them and blah blah blah. I can talk all the woo woo. I can talk all that woo woo for a while. But so with slow moments, I was doing something completely different. I think I was having some sort of existential moment, or had a conversation with somebody else. It's really just about imposter syndrome. It's really just about uh, self doubt, but always with this like under layer of like hope and positivity, but just trying to be honest about how it feels sometimes to be. I don't. I should be more prepared for that answer.
Dude, I kind of blindsided you with that one. It's totally fine. Let me move on to this, and that'll kind of all connect here, I think.
Yeah.
So, we talked a lot about instruments and this and that, and when you were younger. So, do you remember kind of like what got you into songwriting? Did you see somebody else do it, or you saw a band, or you went to a show, or you had a family member that played instruments? I mean, did you take music lessons when you were younger?
I did. I did. Not really consistently. I think it's always been so hard for me to pay attention, but I knew what I wanted to learn. And I had always had a degree of just wanting to translate what was in my head into, something that was, I don't know, that was good in some ways. My parents are both huge music fans and audiophiles, and when I was a kid, there was just always music on, and I mean like always on. It was always on, and so I just picked up a lot of things. And I think when you're around something a lot and you hear a ton of songs, you kind of over time like pick up the structure of how songs are or can be. And within the vein of like the stuff we were listening to is like Dylan and Hendrix and Clapton, and for me, it was like Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, like early 311. That was the first tape I ever got. Was a 311 tape from my friend Ben in
Early
fifth grade.
311 was the shit, yeah.
Early 311 was the shit. That was like the transistor area or era. And sorry, what was the question? We were talking about like when I was a kid.
Well, just like, that when you were younger, did you actually go somewhere and take music lessons at a place or piano, singing, guitar?
Not singing, not guitar. I had drum lessons for a little while, um, from Brian Jones from Agents of Good Roots here in Richmond. And I wasn't with him for very long. Dude is incredible. And at the time, I was just, interested in playing like rock drums. And so, like, yeah, I mean, like here and there, but not really. I think my dad taught me my first chords, and I really idolized Neil Young and Bob Dylan and Springsteen and Tom Petty, and just with music being on forever. And a lot of it was my parents' mutual just obsession with music, and they just put so much of an emphasis on how important that was and how much they like valued these songwriters. And it's like, so over time, I think just combined with what I'm inherently, you know, good at, it was just the notion that, oh, this is important. This is important to people I care about. So like, if I'm naturally inclined to do this thing, I might as well get as good at it as I can. And I think that's maybe just postulating on maybe a possible like early influence, but really it was just music was always on. It was important to my family. My grandfather was a phenomenal concert violinist. My uncle David was like the whole reason I started playing drums, beyond the guy in my Tyrone in my school band in middle school. I remember sitting on his drum set when I was like 3 years old, and I still remember the way his entire kit looked. I still remember the indentations on the rack toms and how he set up his cymbals. And I remember being like probably like 2 feet tall and holding the drumsticks, and it felt like I was like holding, tree trunks. And so music is just in my family, and I think that there's a part of me that's just inclined to be able to do so, to have that sort of the gift of being able to receive and translate those things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've just always been surrounded by music. My cousin Zach, from Virginia Beach, this is that Uncle Dave's son, Zach. He's also got that, and he's living out in Nashville. He goes by Steinza, and he's killing it. He's written songs for great artists. His solo career has just been phenomenal. He's been launching off. He's doing his first headline tour right now, and
Nice.
he's like 24 years old. So yeah, and he's so good, and it's made me so happy to see him do that. So it's our family. A lot of it is family, but yeah, it's just always been there.
That's awesome. And I will see if we can twist your arm and play a song here in a minute. But do you remember when, I don't know how old you may have been, maybe a teenager, maybe younger, when you had a guitar in your hands, or like you were at a piano, and you not listening to the radio or a CD or whatever, the internet or whatever, but when you were playing and then you stumbled across the chords for somebody else's song and you couldn't believe it, like just messing around, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, is that? And then you're playing it, and then all of a sudden you're like, no. And then you're playing it again, and you're like, no. And then you're playing it again, and in your head you're going like, not only are you telling yourself, well, that can't be it. It can't be that easy. Or like, but then you kind of turn that corner. I don't know how else to say it. It's like your mind, you turn this corner when you're playing the 4 chords, whatever it is, and you get into the rhythm, and then you get into the timing, and you're playing, and there's nobody else in the room, and you kind of get lost in that bubble. I don't know, whatever you want to call it, joy bubble or whatever, where
Yeah,
it almost feels like, I don't know what other expression to call it. It feels like home. Like you could be in any state, any city, and all of a sudden you just doing whatever, and then you're by yourself, and then you just pick up a guitar, and then you're just strumming, and all of a sudden your fingers just find these chords. And I remember the first time, and I had been playing guitar for a couple of years. I don't know where I was, and I just all of a sudden started just moving my fingers around, like D chord progression, just a regular D, and all of a sudden I just started moving my other 2 fingers around, and then I wasn't really paying attention, just looking out the window, and then all of a sudden I looked at my hands, and I was like, holy shit, is that free falling? Is that all
yeah,
it is? It's just moving your
yeah,
fingers around and the different voicings for D. And I'm like,
yeah, dude.
and then I'm looking around and I'm like, there's nobody there. And I'm like, and I just kept playing.
Yeah,
It's like, it's just that joy bubble of like, that's why those Tom Petty songs just resonate, because it's just, they got that easy, like laid back. And I'm sure on some level that's what he did too. It's like if you shut off the family, or the family's away doing something, and you're just in your room looking out a window playing guitar, and it's just, you're killing time.
yeah. It's so true. I mean, for me, it was like, and I don't know anybody who this is not the case for, but having, it was just years of being young and looking up tabs online or figuring out on my own other people's songs. Like, I don't think there's any writer or novel writer out there who can write a novel without having read 1,000 novels. Like I just learned so many covers and so many songs, and then started to find the commonalities with between a lot of them, and learning that so many of them overlap, like what you were talking about earlier, how like there could be the same chord structures for different songs that are very recognizably different, um, but also decipherably like have very similar chord structures. Or uh, so after learning that, I think that's where I started building more confidence in my having the right or like the privilege to be able to try the same thing for myself. And I think I've always had things to write about, and so I'm a feeler, and I've had some very unique life experiences that I try to convey in the best way that I can. I used to like write raps, like when I was in middle and high school. I would just like write raps like on a piece of paper. I'd be
Please tell
stuck in
me
study
when you
hall.
were a kid, you started to rap with "My name is so and so, and I'm here to say."
I
I think
never
everybody,
started.
when they were a kid, they did that, and everybody was like, "Listen to shit. Listen to this."
Yeah, dude, that was the those were the days, man. Those are the
Oh
days.
man.
Yeah, this is like the Cash Money Millionaires, like juvenile days, and like Lil Wayne's like first. But anyway, so yeah, after like learning that, oh, you can like take these things and make them your own, I think it started to I just ran with that. And then yeah, just like you were saying, like taking simple chords or like and just like augmenting them a little bit by moving your finger around, and then just seeing how that implies a change in the melody, or see how like they can imply the change in some sort of inflection that differentiates it from the very familiar structure. And I've just done that ever since. And like piano, man, I didn't even like really learn at all until like the pandemic. Like I didn't
Yeah,
my
lots of free
like
time.
yeah, I had a lot of free time, and at the time I was uh, in a relationship, and she was we were living together, and she's a fantastic piano player and musician. She's yeah, the coolest. And she taught me a lot on piano, and also this Canadian YouTube channel called Pianote. I just really connected with her YouTube channel and how she taught piano and chord formations, and all the different positions and inversions and all that cool stuff. And so I to do that, I just was taking a lot of songs that I already have and transposing those to piano, and kind of like teaching myself. I still have so much to learn. Like I'm
Oh
not a
yeah,
great
we never
piano
stop
player.
learning though, man. Well, let
Yeah,
me ask you this, and I swear to God, then we have to get to you playing a song. But
yeah,
I do want to talk about lyric writing, and I'm going to see if you can relate to this because,
sure.
when I work with younger people on projects, whether it's writing or improv or music or anything, the thing people like freeze about or get confused about or have low self-esteem about is like, well, I don't know how to write dialogue, or I don't know how to improvise, or I don't know how to write
Yeah,
lyrics. And here's the thing. Here's the thing
yeah,
that I learned when I was younger, and I tell everybody, even if they already freaking know it, which is, have you ever had a conversation in your life? And they go,
yeah,
what? What do you mean? I'm like, if I'm writing a back and forth thing for a script or something on a page, people have to talk to each other. So in your life, you have gone out in the world and you have talked to strangers and you have
yeah,
said something, either if it's like keep the change or how's your day going or like weather looks crappy or whatever, small talk or whatever. But it's the same thing with improvisation where it's like yes, and it's like if that person doesn't just give you something
yeah.
back, then you're not getting
It's
what you
true.
need. And you know what? That's a
Yeah,
metaphor for life, for relationships. And I think it goes the same way with songwriting for lyrics. It's like
yeah,
at least 50 to 75% of the time, it's not like you're writing at somebody, but if you're
right.
thinking about a relationship or a conversation or something you experience, you're telling a story, but you're not telling it to yourself. So who are you telling it to? You're telling it to the listener, and you're just picturing somebody there. Even I'm sure you've gone to open mics and stuff and shows, and you're standing there and you're playing a song, and the person's looking up at you. So you're telling them like you live this thing, and you're telling them, and they're taking it in. They're picking up what you're putting down. Does that make any sense?
Of course. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, lyric writing. I think you know it's hard.
Energy
I've
drinks
just
are
been
bad, kids. Don't drink these.
Dude, I'm caffeinated right now. I got dry mouth like a motherfucker right now. But um, just having had the luck of being raised on some of the best lyric writers and having it be explained to me why they were good, I was really taught, formally but informally by my parents. And it's, like how to listen to this Dylan song, listen to Hurricane by Bob Dylan, and listening to my dad talk about Reuben Hurricane Carter, the whole story. And then hearing how Bob Dylan, and this goes for so many songs among so many different writers, it is how did he put that in lyrical form? How can you say as much as possible with as little as possible? And maybe Hurricane isn't the best example because
No, it's a great example.
it's so long, but how can you say as much as possible with as little as possible within the framework of a song, not trying to reinvent the wheel? I can't tell you how much restraint do you have if you have 20 verses that you like a lot, but you can only fit 2 or 3, or if you're feeling, whatever, maybe 4,
Yeah.
and having to like offset that by different sections and different parts to keep the song interesting throughout. The restraint of being able to say as much with as little as possible, having what I call a syllabic agreement. Does it sound good coming out? When you say it, I think a lot of, in my early songwriting, and like a lot of writers, they try to get everything that they wrote on the page out, and it doesn't, it's just like cooking, like the mouthfeel, there just isn't good mouthfeel.
Right.
And when you're listening to something like that, there's something that we just inherently enjoy that I don't think a lot of us realize. It's like when you're eating a good recipe, like you can't break down all the ingredients or how they emulsified whatever, or it's at a specific temperature. You just know that it's good. I just know what has sounded good to me. And yeah, I'm just mimicking the best writers that I know. And then over time come to understand what I'm inherently doing,
Mm-hmm.
and then do more of that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that, like,
That totally makes sense.
I don't want to sound pretentious or anything like that. I think, and also, like, I think the inclination to try to wax poetic on everything, to try to sound poetic, or like to sound brilliant. Sometimes you can say something like the song Arrival you were talking about that I wrote. It's like, now food tastes good. Like, that's not a very it's not a
No, but I mean, it's like you're
profound
getting
thing
to
to
the heart of
say.
the matter, though. It's like, what's that song? And when very few people know more or remember more than the chorus of "Why Can't We Be Friends?" It's just the same thing over. But you know what? Anytime it comes on the radio or somebody puts it on a jukebox in a bar, everybody sings along because it's
Yeah,
just a feel-good song, and everyone knows that everyone's got some kind of life attachment story to that. There's not
yeah,
really that much going on with it, but anytime it comes on, people go, "Oh yeah,
yeah. It's because it's, what feeling does that invoke?
yeah."
Who can relate to that? If you don't have to decipher this complexity to really attach to like how it makes you feel, that's the most important thing. There's all kinds of ways to say a very common thing and say it in a different way without having to try again to reinvent the wheel. Now food tastes good. It's like, well, yeah, like when you're, say like, there's no really like emphasis on like depression or like not being well. It's just like about falling in love. But when you're elevated in such a way that everything else seems sweeter because you're grateful to have this like profound thing that we all want or desire or have had or have had and lost, or it's the same. We know what it is. But
I know what you mean. I know what you're saying. I
I
got you.
could talk about lyric writing
Well, let's have you
forever.
grab a guitar if you got one close by, and we'll try and see if we can get something going here.
Can you hear guitar?
Oh yeah.
You reach me in electric ways, I'll touch you in the ways you want me to. But you can read me like the pages in my notebook. Yeah, you see me. The pixelation on my iPhone. Hey, hey. But sometimes I get restless. But sometimes I get restless. Don't you, don't you, don't you? That synesthesia feeling somehow comes easy to you. Yeah, you paint like you sound. Yeah, you're brushing your bright ideas. I think you're brave in all you do. I admire how you think, yeah, 'cause you say what you mean. I ain't ever confused by you. Hey, hey. But sometimes I get restless. But sometimes I get restless, don't you? Sometimes I get restless, don't you, don't you, don't you? 'Cause you breathe and you walk and you run and you climb, you're surrounded, embraced by the hands of time, raised in a cradle to download life, then you're racing to incarnation. Hey, hey. But sometimes I get restless. But sometimes I get restless, don't you? But sometimes I get restless, don't you? Sometimes I get restless, don't you? Sometimes I get restless. And sometimes I get restless, don't you?
Hell yeah, man. See, we made it
Two
work.
chords, man.
I love it. Let the folks know what the name of that one is.
Yeah, that song is called Restless. So yeah, that one's recorded. I'm not sure when I'm putting it out yet, but it's literally just guitar and piano. So that'll come out here.
And it worked really well for this because even though the guitar was a little muted, it didn't matter because the important thing is we're hearing your voice, we're hearing the lyrics. So the guitar was just a good like accent on that. So I knew
Cool.
we'd figure out a way to get through it, man.
Yeah,
And
I'm glad that worked out.
yeah, it worked out. All right, so let me ask you this one. Have you ever have you ever stopped a conversation to write down an idea before you forgot? Have you ever been like a bar, a diner, or a coffee shop, or just hanging out with friends, and all of a sudden that lightning zygote thing just lands in your brain, and someone's talking, and you're like, oh, and then like, what, dude? What are you doing?
You can ask any person I know that question, and yes, that happens all the time. It happens at work. I'm a roofer, so sometimes it'll happen on a roof at work,
Oh
and
shit!
I'll just pause for a second and I'll write it down.
You just got like a little
And
notepad in your pocket, and you're just like,
it's literally just in my iPhone notes folder. That's it. And I've got this other app called Color Notes that I can like organize things by color. And yeah, happens all the time. My friend Michael York, who produced most of the record that I've got coming out this year, when I was a house painter before I was a roofer, and him and I would paint together a lot, and he would do the same thing. He'd be in a different room painting, and I'd hear him like take out his voice memo and like get a melody down I think most of us do that. So yeah, absolutely. Or I'll have like a lyrical idea, has nothing to do with anything I'm talking about, anything I've watched, nothing.
Have you been
at
somewhere
all.
and you're talking to somebody, either like a stranger or making some kind of transaction at a store or something, and the person's either doesn't know what you're talking about or it's a non-creative person, and then it's like you try like in vain for like that 15 seconds to try to explain, like, I just need a napkin, just anything, like you're somewhere without reception, and you're like, and then it looks like you're having like a Tourette seizure or something, and the people are like, sir, here's a pen and a napkin, just whatever you need to do, sir.
I think I still try to like operate within like the confines of like normalcy and like social behavior when I can, but like I will like be like, yeah, I gotta go step over here and do a thing, but really I'm just like writing, or like I'll be like, I'm just running to the bathroom real quick, but I'm really just like writing something down. But I mean, it's not as manic these days. But yeah, there were times where I would stay up for 2 or 3 days at a time and just write nonstop. And sometimes I would get, a whole song or two songs, and sometimes it would literally just be like one really good line that I'd have to put away and then build around that framework. It's like I heard it like a movie I watched last night or a show, this show called From, and this guy was trying to, they're trying to figure out what this like other world that they're in, and it's like a jigsaw puzzle, and sometimes you just have to have two pieces that connect to build around that. And I think lyrics can be like that for me too, where I'll either have a line that is a good descriptor of something within the grander scope of what the song is about, or whatever person or place or situation or historical event. And I also write from the perspectives of other people too. Like not everything is about me. Sometimes I can write it as though it sounds like it's about me. And of course, like I'm going to put a little bit of myself in there because I can't help it. But yeah, when those ideas come, they just come. And sometimes it'll be an entire song in a day, and it'll song like I've got that's coming out soon called Olivia. I started writing 5 years ago, and I was stuck on one section, and it wasn't everything I wrote. I knew wasn't right. It wasn't the right thing, and I'll sit on something for years if I have to. But when I know it's right, it is. And then I beta test it with some of my close friends who I trust their opinion, and I'll be like,
I
"This is
like to
it.
say
This is the one."
those are the friends that I like to say are the like the look, man, does this suck?
Yeah,
Like you pass it around to those friends where like you need that brutal honesty, man. You need those people that are going to be like, man, you really went up your ass on this. Someone like, what are you talking about? Well,
yeah,
four of them, they're like, just reel it back. Come on.
yeah. It's just when you just know. And
Have you ever been in that
anyway,
situation where you're stuck somewhere and you get a great idea and either you have no reception or you can't use your phone and then by the time you can get to a place or stop what you're doing, then you lose half the idea, or that every creative person has this where you're like, oh, I'll finish that tomorrow. I'm gonna knock out, and then you wake up the next morning. What was I thinking yesterday? What
all the
happened?
time,
The
all the
worst,
time.
right? Do you keep like a pad and paper by your bed or your phone charger right there so you can just be like, if you got to in the middle of the night to just scribble something?
Yeah, like as convenient as the phone is, I can really, you know, evoke some things that might not, like if you're, it might not be conducive to like writing it in a thing. And so I romanticize things sometimes. So like I will romanticize a notebook. Like if I'm trying to write something that, it's got like a certain feel, like I would prefer to write in a notebook, but there's nothing I've ever done that I can't start in a notes folder or in my voice memos thing. Like it's not, I'm not reinventing the wheel. It's just, like I was grocery shopping recently, and I was like pushing a cart, and like when you see people like leaning up against the handle of the cart, and they're like on speakerphone, like they're talking to their wife, like trying to figure out how to get the right cereal or like what else they were supposed to get. Like I will do that every now and then, but I'm leaning up against it. I'm like just like talking. Like I'll even talk like conceptually into a phone. Like here's a concept, here's the framework, here's the general idea, here's some of like the minutia, here's some things to like reinforce that. What is the introduction of this idea? How does it conclude itself? Is there some, how does it come across as a complete thought? And like does it make you feel anything? Does it make me like, I don't write with an audience in mind. I
Right.
write to go,
Well,
am I
you're
expressing a
writing for
clear
yourself
thought?
first and foremost, right?
Yeah.
You have
and
to.
and also one thing I want to impart is like, for any songwriters who might be listening, is like one thing that helped me in the biggest way was, to somebody told me to write songs as though you'll never show them to anyone. And that really changed how honest and authentic I was able to be in certain songs, because we're all afraid of like public embarrassment or like being so like exposed and vulnerable, to things. But once I started writing as though like no one was ever going to hear it, I found that it was my best stuff and the things that people connected to the most. Because, you know, things I like I'm afraid to say or other people are afraid to say, but we all feel. Um, it started to improve the connective nature of my writing. So anyway, that's a
Yeah.
random like thought blurb, but
I
I
mean,
want to tell everyone that.
yeah, and touching on that thing of like the notepad by the bed, or where you wake up in the middle of the night and you scribble something down and then look. One time, and I made this happen more than once. I woke like had this idea, like had a headache or whatever, and I woke up and I just like turned on the light and I just grabbed a pen real quick and just scribbled it down, and I was like, yeah, genius or whatever. And then I was like, oh, I can't wait to work on that in the morning, right? And then like when the morning comes along and it's like a Sunday morning, and I'm like, ugh, getting up at like whatever it was, and I roll over and I look at it and I was like, what is this? And it literally was
Yeah,
like something like frozen, like old frozen burrito, a lock of her red flowing hair, fertilizer. And I'm like, did I even mean to write a haiku? That was weird. Like, what the hell?
yeah,
That makes
yeah,
no sense. But I was like, kind of does.
yeah, and
Like
like
the end of a relationship thing or something.
yeah, it's such a universal. Yeah, that's another like trying to reinvent the wheel thing too. Is like singing about things that other people haven't sung about. It's like, well, we're all so similar in so many ways. Like it's,
I mean, people
but
think
yeah, that happens all the
that
time.
they're like fortresses, right? They feel like, oh, I can't share this, or no one will understand, or that, like, again, I keep coming back to this, but like when you're younger and you're self-conscious and this and that, and it's like you just can't understand my painfully painful pain. Like you
Yeah,
just can't process what I'm going through, man. Like I have a different notebook for every day of the week, and this is like a Tuesday thing, and I can only share with you Friday stuff or whatever. Or like, when the Sex Pistols were starting out and everything that Johnny Rotten was saying was like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. We have no influences, whatever. I'm like, so no
yeah,
one taught you to talk, no one taught you to sing, no one taught
yeah,
you
dude.
to play. And then a couple years later, like, well, actually our influences were this.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is just like ego. Like ego can get in the way of like any of this, like any of the arts at all. And like you know, I used to battle with that of like so worried about like what other people would think or like if it was like cool enough or like clever enough or yeah, and I think like attaching ego to like either think that you're not shit, like because I'll toggle back and forth between like, man, I'm really proud of like this thing that I've made, and also being like, you're dog shit. And like nowadays, like knowing that that's not true, but not everything that I write is like profound. You know, like I write like I'll write things like that in my notes where I'll write like three a bunch of words or concepts, and like later on I'll be able to trust myself that I can connect those things into a cohesive thought or concept. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. Like my notebook looks like what you were just talking about. I've got all kinds of like things that like I know I had a good idea and I can't remember what I was trying to connect. And then sometimes it's a lot of bullshit or like it doesn't make any sense or it's like a completed thing like how it's like full stanzas and full verses and it's like dog shit, it's garbage. And that's just part of it. Like
Well, yeah, I'm
that's
sure there's
just
stuff
part of
when
it.
you were younger, when you were like going to open mics for the first time and you're playing it, and it's like you're in that whatever you want to call it, larva stage or whatever, caterpillar
I
life
like
or
that. Yeah.
whatever. But it's all when you're younger, it's all like bravado. It's all like, hell yeah. And you're singing songs and you're just like Moon, June, Spoon with the rhyme schemes and everything. And people are just
Yeah. Yeah.
doing it. But it's like certain people can get that across because they have that bravado and that stage presence. And they're just like, you're young and you're screaming it out or whatever. And then you get older and you're like, making jokes about something that's a rhyme scheme of moon, June, spoon. And then people are like, oh, but
Yeah.
when you're like, 16, 17, you're just like, I don't need your rules, old man. I don't need your like meter and time scale and pitch and whatever.
Yeah. Again, I think it's ego. I think it just plays into like the need to feel important or different or unique. And I think that's really cool in a lot of ways. Like if you're exploring something that, you know, feels new and different and like makes you feel good or like that other people might like, I think that's really cool. But when I was just like coming up with chords and being like, man, this I'm singing about the same thing or like I'm playing in the same structures, like so this can't be that good. And I would just never show them to anybody except for my friends. Like yeah, I don't know, like jumping off from what you had said about like, you know, the concept of like frisson, like the French word for like I don't know what it directly translates to, but it's just that feeling of like satisfaction, like when you're satisfied. Like
Yeah.
one thing that I've always felt is like taking something familiar and doing it in the way that it was intended in its traditional way, or taking something familiar and changing it up a little bit so that it's still tethered to that familiar thing, but it's different enough to like be interesting. I think leaning into those two things, like I think what differentiates something like great is like leaning into that traditional thing. Like say you've got a traditional country structure and it's a familiar feeling, but it doesn't like check all the boxes. And then when you're trying to like again like take something familiar and then completely reinvent the wheel and it just doesn't land in the right way. Like I think Rainbow Kitten Surprise is a great example of taking these rhythms and like structures and cadences and uh, mixing them all together in a way that's feels somehow familiar, but
Mhm.
it is so different. Like if you break down the structures of some of their songs, like it's just like multiple songs within a song. But when you listen to the song, like you don't like consciously, you're not aware of that. Like some people are like, but in a way, like you listen to the same song and you're like, it all works so cohesively. It could be different time signatures, different. You could change the key, you can change the rhythm, you could change. There's got to be like one element sticking all of it together, and they managed to do that with while changing so much within a single song. Um, and then you've got bands like Susto, who Justin, what's his name? Justin Osborne. I love that band. They're from South Carolina, Charleston, and a lot of his lyrics are so simple, like so deliberately simple. They convey such a simple point, and it's so poignant. It does it so well, and an audience will connect to that because it's you can connect to that feeling. And then you've got people like Father John Misty, who's got such a uh, profound and robust vocabulary and is able to imply it in some ways that are like ostensibly pretentious, but like he's aware of that. And then in some ways where it's just like such a novel way of expressing, again, these like same feelings and thoughts and concepts, but done in its very unique way. Anyway, I'm rambling,
No,
but I
no,
can
I know
talk
what
about
you're
that
saying. Like
forever.
I was gonna say, and even use some older references too, that like whenever I hear, or I guess whenever he very rarely anymore puts out an album of like Peter Gabriel, it's to the point now where I hear a Peter Gabriel song and I'm amazed, I'm just like blown away, but I'm also hearing the studio as an instrument
Yeah.
rather than somebody sitting with a piano or guitar or whatever. And he's just a master, or has become just a master of the song is whatever I say it is, and it will be structured however I want it to be because I have unlimited resources and unlimited time to do whatever I want and 50 variations on anything, and you will buy all my B-sides, you bastards. But on the
Right.
other side, because we will, on the other side of that
Right.
coin is something like Sonic Youth, which I appreciate, but oh my God, there's only so many Sonic Youth songs I can listen to from a certain point because wherever the traditional, I guess I want to say like middle eight or guitar soloist, Thurston Moore is like, nope. And it's just, you know, almost
Yeah.
literally like just taking like a ruler and just banging it on, and then it's like, then back to the next chorus or the next verse.
Yeah.
And I get that, and it's like, okay, man, cool. But it's like, I don't know, man. I don't feel like they ever got past that. Like they were together for like 20 something years and like we loved them for it, but it's like I think going to see if I ever would have gone to see them, I would have like, yeah. But then like now as I'm a writer myself, and it's just like, like 7, 8 songs, cool, but it's like maybe something else because it's like bands that were inspired by them, like Pixies or Radiohead, they aped that sound for the first couple of albums, and then they're like, okay, well, we got that, we got it, and we're gonna do
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
different. It's like the
Yeah. Yeah.
Clash. When you hear the early Clash, they're like, oh, we want to do what the Damned or the Pistols or the Ramones are doing, but then we're gonna like next thing
Yeah.
you know, they're doing reggae songs and hip hop and funk.
Yeah. Things
Does that make
evolve.
sense? Where it's like
Yeah,
you're
of
talking about
course.
pretentious stuff, but with Gabriel, it's like, yeah, it's pretentious, but it's kind of like, well, if I had unlimited resources, I'd do the same thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but with like on the other hand, like the lo-fi, like Sonic Youth, where it's like okay, you can say screw it and not have a middle eight or just noise or whatever, but it's like 8, 10 albums later, you're like, what else you got, man? Because I'm like, I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. It's cool, but and I think that's why collectively as fans, sometimes people only like a certain era of a band that's been around for a long time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we all do. Like, I think a lot of it is contextual too, because having the context of like when an album comes out, like it's like a younger generation listening to albums that came out a long time ago within the context of what they're used to now, like the hyper production and the flawless nature of like a lot of what modern music is and like what is being put out. I think like with Sonic Youth, I'm not like super uh, I didn't like dive into the Sonic Youth hole back in the day, but like in context to what else was around at the time, it was so like anti that. And so it was very interesting because it was such a departure from what people were listening to. And then people latch onto that. And then there's so many subdivisions of that sound. And then it becomes diluted. It's like I don't know. I don't know if this is a good example. Like when the Black Keys, their music is so derivative of so many things, but it's intrinsically good. And
Yeah.
so like people will shit on the Black Keys, but it's like, dude, like
For
they're
two
fucking
guys
great.
making all of that music, and then
Yeah,
yeah, they've got more people playing with them live now or whatever, but it's still two guys writing all those songs unless they bring in a producer to help them co-write or whatever. But
yeah. And they're not
the
claiming to
pride of
reinvent the
Akron,
wheel either.
Ohio, I mean, I think that they're great, and I'm glad that they did start doing stuff like working with like Danger Mouse and stuff and kind of like
Yeah,
augmenting their sound. Because like I was saying, like I was so into their stuff, and then when they started doing that, it was like, okay, cool, they're gonna have like this second act where they can pivot and they can do other things, kind of like Jack White. The White Stripes are
yeah,
awesome, but as they went along, and it's like he's writing more complicated stuff. Nothing against Meg White, but it's four on the floor for every song unless he's
yeah,
playing acoustic. And then when he went solo, it was like his whole palette of music just completely expanded. Because like if you go to a Jack White concert, you're going to hear most of those White Stripes songs anyway.
yeah,
You're going to hear the Raconteurs stuff. You're going to hear Dead Weather, all that stuff. So I mean, I would have loved to have seen the White Stripes back in the day, but it's kind of frustrating too when you go see somebody's side project. Like I saw the Raconteurs and I was like, oh, I wanted them to play some White Stripes stuff. But
yeah.
that's just the thing about being a fan.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like yeah, I feel the same way. Like I get that. I think being on both sides of the coin, like the fans want to hear what they want to hear, but like we all evolve. Like we evolve as people, we evolve as musicians. Like I I definitely feel that. Like you get inspired by something else and it's not like you're less attached to the other music that you've written, but like you want to experiment and try other things. And like if the audience doesn't like it, like it's not really there's nothing you can really do about it, because you can write within the vein of like what's popular and what you've done in the past, and but it might not be as genuine, it might not be as authentic, and I think people subconsciously know that. Like when you hear bands who like try to replicate old popular albums, like it's not fresh anymore. And say they like do something totally different, like you were talking about Radiohead, like the difference between Pablo Honey and Amnesiac or Kid A, it's so
It's
different,
worlds
but they're
apart. Yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
Like Tom York and Johnny Greenwood, like their sensibilities are so good that they are just whatever they
Yeah, if you listen to
do.
the Smile, right? What they're doing now with the band The Smile.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's like this nothing like Radiohead, but it's kind of is. It's kind of just an extension of going down the his film score hole that Johnny's been in, and
Yeah.
Tom getting more into like craft work and like more of jazz kind of stuff. And it's just people want them to be Radiohead, but people want to also have nostalgia for when they were younger. Like I think there was this thing when they went from OK Computer to like, oh, they're going to be the next Pink Floyd, and it was like, no, there already is a Pink Floyd, man. Like, let them
Yeah.
do whatever. And so everybody who was playing electric guitar when Kid A came out were like, what the? Because this isn't what I want, man. This isn't what I.
Yeah.
It's not what you thought you wanted. and then it takes your while, and then they still did guitar songs after that, you know. Um, I like it in Rainbows, and a lot of people might not like that one. I think that's a great album, like song
It's
for
a great
song.
record. Yeah, it's a great record.
Um,
It grew on me. I
Hail
didn't
to the
like it at
Thief
first,
before
but
that
it
was
grew on
even
me.
great. And then, but it's like I didn't really care for like King of Limbs or the one that came after that. It wasn't really my jam. But that's okay because there's a lot more music out there, and then they're getting new fans all the time, you know. But let me ask you a few more questions here before we wrap it up because we've been rapping for
Sure.
a while here. So coming back to your song, Olivia, I'm going to ask the question that you probably get all the time. First part of it was, is it based on a real person? And part two is, was it a conscious decision to put all the reverb on the voice to make it kind of have that Lumineers kind of vibe, or is that just something you stumbled on?
Well, Olivia's not released yet. Are you talking about the video that I've got on
Yeah,
Instagram?
yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that it's not released yet. So I actually when I flew out to Denver in August, where and it's what's weird is that so remember earlier I was telling you like I had that song from years ago and I didn't finish it until somewhat recently within the last year. Um, I flew out to Denver in August and I had recorded a version of it here, and I just wasn't satisfied with it. So I flew out to Denver, and in the last day, I played a show out there, and I ran into my friend Jason Brazel, who's an awesome musician. We've recorded together, and he, played in my band for a while out there, and he's also an audio engineer. He's got a studio at his house, and my plane was flying out this evening, and he was like, "You should stop by my studio in the morning," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I've got the song Olivia that I'll try to do," and I got to his studio, and I realized that I he taught me the tuning that I wrote Olivia in, and I started writing that song with him, not with him, but like in the room with him. So it was this full circle thing. So I recorded it again out in Denver. I haven't like fully listened to it yet, but I felt good about doing it. I hadn't had much sleep. Like recording vocals at like 9 o'clock in the morning is not ideal, but
All right.
I think it'll turn out to be okay. So that's not even out yet. That's not like mixed or I haven't, produced it yet or anything like that.
Shouldn't have been mentioned it, or
No, man. Yeah, it's coming out. Like it's coming
it's
out.
out there on the interweb. So
Yeah, it's a love song, and yeah, it is based. It's funny, like it's having started like 5 years ago. Like in context, it's really about somebody in the last year. Yeah,
okay.
that's all. That's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
cool enough, cool enough. So are you more comfortable performing solo, or is playing with the band something you want to get back into doing again?
I mean, I've played in bands since I was 15. I would play in a band all the time. Like there's benefits and drawbacks of both. Like I just love playing music with my friends. Like there's no greater feeling than like coming together with people that you mesh with musically and ideally like as friends, and something coming together within like the framework of a single song, and then having other things orbit it and creating this kind of galaxy that is just powerful. And then you just like you fine tune it down into this thing, and then you've got songs and songs, and then you develop a set, and then there's something magical about the full band. Like this is, I'm not saying anything novel or new, but I fucking love being in a band and I love playing in that environment. But there's also a cool element of like playing intimate shows where it's just me and a guitar. Um, I do enjoy that. I prefer playing with a band, which is funny because I haven't in a long time, and it's just mostly just been just me and a guitar. Um, and yeah, I love both of them. Like if I'm touring, which I never have done. Like I've never done that. You can be in like BJ Barham, from American Aquarium. He'll like get in his car and just like do a solo tour for 2 months and like never take a night off, and he's just in his car. And that's so convenient and cool to be able to do that, and less things you have to line up and other people's schedules and other
If you
people's
can
like,
afford it.
yeah. Well, I mean, if you're making the money on the road to be
Right.
able to sustain that, like he's an incredible songwriter, and he has worked really, really hard to build American Aquarium over the years. So like I look up to the way that he like does those things. So that's just one example. But and then other people in a band will have like different, personal obligations, or people get sick, or, people are having kids or getting married and like have other obligations, other things. So coordinating all those things can be difficult. But when it works out, it's the best thing ever. I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by really talented people, who like the music I make, and we're able to come together to like make it into something bigger and really enjoy doing that. And hopefully people like it. And so,
Have you
yeah,
ever been on
I love
stage
playing
by
music.
yourself when you first started doing like solo stuff, having been in a band? Were you ever playing, standing there playing and singing and getting to that, like middle eight or solo section, and then like turning to somebody that's not there because you're so used to being with the band and waiting for that like gear to kick in where the bass and the drums come in, or the rhythm guitar, or somebody takes a solo and you're just like, right, right, right.
Yeah, yes, except in a certain way, it's in my head and I can hear.
Where someone would come in, right?
Yeah, hold on, give me 1 second. Did I lose you?
No, you're good.
Um, sorry, that was my son calling me. Hold on 1 second.
All right. Can't talk now, having rock star interview.
Rockstar interview. Yeah, I've got a 16-year-old son who's also a musician. He's like, I need to go pick him up from his friend's house. Um, what were we talking about?
Oh,
What
just
did you
like,
say?
The transition from being in a band
Oh,
to a performer where you turn around and there's no overdrive that the song is going to kick into. It's just, oh, that's right. I am the song. Okay, here we go. Back to the chorus.
yeah. Like sometimes I'll hear the whole band, and depending on how I'm feeling, I can like fluctuate in tempos, like in certain songs. I'll play at a very different tempo depending on the day or like what my mood is. And sometimes I'll hear my drummer telling me to like be consistent, and then I'll hear, you know, a guitar player friend of mine, like I'll hear Joe play from a different era. I'll hear basically I hear the band in my head.
All right.
Sorry, my phone is blowing up.
No, 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 you're right. Well, let's wrap it up with this one because we have been rapping for a while. So I guess
Yeah.
let the folks know what's coming up next for you and where can people find your songs and reach out to you online.
Yeah, so my Instagram handle and TikTok handle is Isaac Friend is Alive. That's ISAAC, Friend is Alive. It's got one S and two A's, not two S's. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok there. I've got 3 singles out on Spotify right now. It's on Apple. It's everywhere else. But I'm going to be just trickling out individual songs over the next year. I've got a full album already mixed and mastered. So there's about 15 or 16 songs that'll come out all together. Probably more of an acoustic stripped EP at first. And then there's going to be a full produced record to come after that. But if you follow me on those platforms, which I'm relatively new at, like being active on, and I'm really trying. So
It's tough,
follow me
man.
there.
It's like we only have so many hours in the day.
Yeah, and follow me there, and I'll let you know everything else that's going on. But a lot of music coming out, and a lot of cool things I'm pretty proud of that are going to be coming out after that too. So if you want to follow along, you can. It'd be cool. Yeah.
Cool. Well, awesome. I
That's
just
that.
wanted to say thank you for coming on the show. I've been looking forward to it. Thank you for playing the song for us. Man, I
Yeah, man.
expect nothing but awesome things for you next year. I think you're going to blow up. I think your album's going to take off. Maybe you'll have other people that will want to do all the social media stuff for you so you don't have to mess with it because it's
Yeah,
a pain in the
yeah.
ass. But thank you,
That'd be
man. And I just
great.
want to say best of luck to you and just enjoy the rest of your weekend, man. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
man. Thanks so much. Yeah, it was great to meet you.
You too. Bye now.
All right, take care.
Bye.